Okay, this is honestly one I didn't expect to be watching, let alone talking about. Because after after Death Note, um, Full Metal Alchemist, and reboot the Guardian Code, which destroy the greatest cartoon of all time, why don't ya? Turn it into a bad Power Rangers clone. We need 4 teams with attitude. But that's another discussion for another day. I had lost faith in Netflix's ability to adapt anything that had previously existed. Also, Lost in Space is a family show, and under normal circumstances, Netflix only seems to believe that 2 TV ratings exist. And those are Y7 for kids' cartoons and MA for everything else. I mean it. I mean, with the basic premise of Iron Fist, the other Marvel shows somewhat benefit from the MA rating, but with the basic premise of Iron Fist, when I saw that MA rate, and I watched the whole thing, it was like, if you had just cut away from some of the more gory bits and dropped some of the bad language, you would have had a TV-14 show. And what about the basic premise of Iron Fist about a guy coming back from being raised by monks to take over his company? What about that? What do you gain by making that TVMA? What says that that has to be more extreme than what we see on Arrow every week? I don't think there is. It's a guy with a glowing fist who's coming back to get his company back to get his family's company back from out of the control of criminals. And so and I'm not against TVMA. I love Deadwood. I love Jessica Jones. That brings me to the star of this series. Probably her and Parker Posey are probably the best known people. Molly Parker from Deadwood, but anyway, there was a lot of also another reason I was avoiding it was because most people don't realize this, but the first season that was black and white, the very first season that was black and white of the original Lost in Space was actually pretty good. It was pretty good TV for the time of science fiction in a survivalist setting with little things like how do you fix a fuel, how do you get to a lever on the outside of a ship without floating off. If someone does float off, how on earth do you get a line to them in time, and stuff like that. It was a much more serious, down to earth show than it became in the color season. What happened in the color season was the Batman fad broke out, and that brought camp into the mainstream in 1960s television, and so Lost in Space changed to suit that when it made the switch to color. And most stations only rerun the color seasons because they figured viewers switch off anything black and white. The exception to this rule, if it is a rule that actually holds true, the exception with classic television, the exception to this rule seems to be the Andy Griffith Show, where people seem to switch off when it goes to color, and Don Knotts left the show. And so you have stations all over the country rerunning the Andy Griffith Show in black and white. So anyway, I actually really liked that first season, and I found the movie to be painful. I mean, just painful to watch. So I wasn't planning on watching this, but I heard so many good things about it, I decided to tune in. And this is going to be spoiler free. It's going to be brief and spoiler free, but I'm going to tell you right now, you can believe the hype. It's actually good. I'm not normally a fan of gender flipping either, so that was another thing against this. But let me tell you, it works. Now here's the thing, you have to watch all 10 episodes to see what they're doing. At first, for the first like 5 episodes, you think that it's just going to be a show, basically about Ms. Robinson beating down her Marine husband for daring to do his job, and she seems to be really down on him. And there's even a moment that really soured me on her, and I think it was episode 2, where in a flashback you see that she was actually, when the kids were okay with their father being deployed, she was actually saying, no, you shouldn't, he shouldn't be deployed and all that, he shouldn't have abandoned us and stuff. She actually said that to Penny at one point, and it's like, your daughter is okay with her father being gone. She's not, so now you're trying to cause her psychological trauma just because you're unhappy with him? Lady, just get a divorce, but don't try to make the kid, but don't try to cause the kids trauma just because you want everybody to be against him and see him as evil. I'm not saying John Robinson is perfect at this, but he is a Marine, and she did know that when she married him. And yes, he did lie about being recalled. Okay, that happens, but it's not really. But it's not really there. But on the other hand, the Marines do tend to weed out people who don't volunteer when the world is falling apart, and the world was falling apart. So it's probably only a matter of time before he got called back. And yeah. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, basic premise: there's some sort of disaster, and they have to send colonists out. There's more than just a Jupiter 2 in this version. There are a ton of ships, and something happens, and it takes them down. And I'm not going to get into spoilers. I'm just going to tell you real quick that all the characters are well drawn, and there are some politics in this, and but it is edge of your seat, and it is a good family show. This is done within the range of a PG rating, and yet it kept me on the edge of my seat. They have peril in it, but they don't have to show blood, and this is a clean-cut American family who doesn't have to curse. Even a character who they changed, who I didn't like the change at first. They made a major change to Don West, but I even liked that when all was said and done. But the thing is, you have to watch all 10 episodes because all the character flaw because everything that looks like a character flaw and it looks like they're getting away with, and it looks like they're going to do the typical thing of just drama for drama's sake, it gets addressed. This isn't Arrow or another show like that, or Castle or any of those shows. These shows, problems get addressed, and their being in the survival situation actually causes the family to be able to focus on a lot of their problems. John Robinson is what you would expect. He's able to teach Will survival skills. Will is again is one of, if not the best character. The big relationship it is between him and his father, and him and the robot, of course, which is a driving force throughout the show. But one thing we lose because of the gender switch, and I guess they were afraid it would come off too predatory if they try to put it, but in the old show, you got the idea that one of the reasons Dr. Smith was being allowed to stick around was that they didn't know he was behind. Well, Dr. Smith isn't behind it in this one. Dr. Smith, by the way, is played by Parker Posey, and she does a great job. Here's the thing: in this version, Dr. Smith is pretty much a petty criminal who is a complete sociopath. They play it 100% right. She seems to believe that everybody is out to screw her over, so she might as well screw them over before they get her. And that's how a sociopath thinks. She repeatedly says that she's just being honest about what she is, and she knows how to expertly manipulate people's emotions, but she sees them as nothing more than something to be manipulated for her own ends of survival. And she sees everything broken down into an end of survival, and she sees the need to always try to present herself in the best light, even when there's no need. And you see her hoarding stuff, which again plays into this idea that she's some sort of criminal. You hear a criminal record, and it's like breaking and entering, vagrancy, shoplifting, that sort of thing. But it was good to get her left behind on Earth. So she did something and got off of Earth, and that makes her character actually interesting to watch. And it's like you get this feeling that she would like to belong to this family, but part of her does, but she is falling. but she can't. But she's done too much wrong that she's afraid of being found out. She's too self-interested and selfish, and she will screw anybody over. I'm not trying, and I'm not making an excuse for her character. But here's the thing: sociopaths are incapable of really feeling for others. They can feel for themselves, and they can fake feeling for others. But what's expertly played here is that they sociopaths tend to see things as just a matter of their survival, and see things as just one big game where they have to keep moving, and they have to keep moving forward, and they're always looking for ways to manipulate people. So she's so busy, so she can't. So she seems incapable of the trust that would be needed. And there are several moments where you think she's going to redeem herself, and throughout the season, and it's like, despite the terrible things she's done, you still sort of are rooting for her, saying, yes, all right, listen, you helped here. But you see that, every time she helps, there's always a self-interested mark. And that's very true to the character of Dr. Smith. Although in later season, although that, it, yeah, and Dr. Smith, actually, I think she works amazingly well in this setting. And it really plays in, and adds the intensity of the story, and adds all sorts of things. Now the one thing is, of course, you lose this sort of student-mentor relationship that Dr. Smith had with Will Robinson in the original. In the original show, you get this feeling that is that Will Robinson likes Dr. Smith, and yeah, the show decided to focus on its two most well-realized characters. So Will Robinson and Dr. Smith became the unlikely duo that became the show's leads on the original show. And it was because he was the only one who shared a lot of interest with Will Robinson in the original show, and you got the feeling that, and it seemed like Dr. Smith himself had been a child prodigy just like Will Robinson, and he knew what it's like, and you got the feeling that and you always got the feeling that if there's one person on the ship that Dr. Smith liked, it was Will Robinson. Also, in the last two seasons, Dr. Smith's villainy became more of, well, trying to trick people out, into trying to trick the family into getting him out of chores, or or he wanted money so badly there wasn't anything that he thought was profitable that he wouldn't stupidly touch, or something like that. Whereas here it's all survival power play, and yet it never goes over the line. This is a show you can safely watch with kids in the room. I mean, there are a few instances where somebody's about to curse, but they always cut away, and the blood, and when they do surgery, Jenny's a doctor in this one, and when they have a few scenes of people being injured where she's doing surgery, but it's done in a very old TV show kind of way, with just enough blood to make you see how serious it is, but it doesn't go over the top like so many shows, and you don't see people getting their heads blown off. This is such a breath of fresh air. And what's more, Netflix actually spent on this show. This is one of the most incredible looking shows I have ever seen in my life. It just is. And the perfect blend of CGI there's the perfect blend of CGI and practical shooting, and they went, and it's filmed in Canada like most American shows today, and you can tell at parts, but they found some incredible parts of Canada to film in that I have never seen before, and they knew just where to add CGI enhancement to give the alien planet just this extra push. And everything is well done. I can't think of a time when the special effects let me down. At first I thought the robot they were gonna make the mistake of the new Battlestar Galactica. On the new Battlestar Galactica, if you remember, the Centurion model Cylons, they made the mistake of making them CGI instead of guys in a suit like the old show. And that meant that they had very limited screen time. I think they could afford 15 minutes of screen time per season for those guys, because they were all CGI. and it also meant that they never looked fully integrated with the when they were in the scene. So that meant that you had to go with the human looking Cylons. They were trapped going with the human looking Cylons all the time, and that limited what they could do with them. The robot, it starts out CGI, but then it changes itself, and when it changes itself, it becomes a guy in a suit, and it is a very good looking suit. There's nothing hokey about it, and it just blends in so much better, and it means that the robot is a real character, and that one of the relationships is kept in, and that the relationship between Will and the robot is a very much a driving force. But everybody's relationships, there aren't really any villains in this. I mean, besides Dr. Smith. And yeah, that relationship, that sort of student-mentor relationship that the original Dr. Smith had with Will is lost, but it's more of a made up for by what Dr. Smith does, and Parker Posey doesn't shoot a scenery the way Jonathan Harris did, although there's a nice nod in that spoilers, she's not the real Dr. Smith. She stole that ID, because pretty much everything she has is stolen, and her initial is J. Harris. So Jonathan Harris was actually a really good actor, and he did what he thought the script demanded of him on the original Lost in Space, and he was always a joy to watch. He and Bill Mummy were always the best parts of that show. And it really says something. Here's the bottom line, is this show looks great, it's exciting without going overboard, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it ends in such a way that the wait for this and the wait for the next season of this and the new season of Stranger Things is probably going to kill me. But here's something that should tell you everything you need to know. Bill Mummy, after he saw the script, refused to do a cameo in the Lost in Space movie in the 1990s. He does a cameo in this show. So that should tell you everything. But whereas the Cubans, Dr. Smith is the only one that could be classified as a villain, and there are tons of mystery, it's just... This is the best science fiction show I have seen since Person of Interest. It is well worth watching. It'll keep adults on the edge of their seats, and it'll keep kids, and I think it'll bring in a new generation of kids. So I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10, despite some character work that I wish had been done a little differently. There is some, but I don't want to give that away. And my favorite characters were Will Robinson and Penny, and I just, my hat goes off to Netflix for actually pulling this off, finally. I mean, you couldn't pull off Reboot, but somehow you pulled off this. This feels very much like the show Lost in Space's first season would be if it were made today. It's very much in the spirit, and they even kept, in the end credits, the original John Williams theme tune. Yeah, but that's something that I've shocked to find a lot of people don't know, is John Williams did the music for the original Lost in Space. He's credited as Johnny Williams, but it's John Williams, and they kept his theme tune in it. Oh, and the music for this one is done by Christopher Lenitz, who, if anybody's watched my Let's Play of Mass Effect, you'll know he's starting with some of the DLC on Mass Effect 2. He did scoring on Mass Effect. So, and he does an amazing job scoring this. So, yeah, the cast is good, the characters are well written, everything is good. So, yeah, watch this. Go out and watch it. If you have any interest in adventure shows or science fiction, watch this show. Okay? See you next time.